Karl to explain how come, while he was Bush's brain, they had the largest agricultural subsidies in American history. They had No Child Left Behind, which made sure that the federal government got its nose the rest of the way under the tent with education. I'd like to know why they bailed out Fannie and Freddie. I'd like to know.
All right, let's take each one of these. We got three. Let's take the first three. Before you get into the laundry list, we were opposed to the Farm Bill. We said we want to change it and drive it in a free market way. And you're right. Republicans and Democrats alike from farm states said no. We were fighting a war, and at the end of the day, we had to make a trade-off. But you go back and look at what Bush said. He was opposed to this. He was opposed to Howard Dean's milk cartel up in Vermont. We lost a Republican senator because of it. Jim Jeffords said Bush is against that Vermont milk cartel. I'm out of the Republican Party as a result.
Bush vetoed the bill? Did he veto the bill?
No, he didn't veto the bill. And you know why? Because we're in the middle of a war. We were in the middle of a war, and because the Republican leadership said, we will not be with you, Mr. President, if you veto the bill. Fannie and Freddie, you go back and read our first budget in 2001. In 2001, in our first budget in April of 2001, it said Fannie and Freddie are too big, they are out of control, they're involved in a lot of activities that they shouldn't be involved in, and the government lacks the regulatory authority to subject them to the same scrutiny that we subject banks, credit unions, and savings and loans. And starting in 2001, we went out to try and regulate Fannie and Freddie, which was a criminal enterprise masquerading as a political effort dominated by Democrats. We fought for 5 years to do it. Think about this. Think about this.
All right, time to separate these guys.
Think about this. I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish, Howard. You don't like what I'm about ready to say. Between 1938 and 2000, Fannie and Freddie bought $2 trillion worth of the mortgage-backed paper. We began to attempt to regulate them, subject them to the same scrutiny the bank has in 2001. The Clinton regulator walked in the door, for God's sake, to the White House and said, I think they're cooking the books, but I don't have the power to make them come clean. And sure enough, both Fannie and Freddie were cooking the books. Fannie to the tune of $5 billion, and Freddie, that was Freddie, and Fannie to the tune of $8 billion. In the 5 years between 2001 and 2005 in which we attempted to regulate them, they went out and bought $1.4 trillion of additional paper in 5 years. The bill passes in the Senate Finance Committee in 2005 to subject them to the same kind of regulation. Chris Dodd walks to Richard Shelby's face and says, I will lead the Democrats in a united effort, supported incidentally by the newly elected senator from the state of Illinois, Barack Obama, to filibuster any attempt to regulate Fannie and Freddie. Do not bring it to the floor. I have every Democrat lined up. It's filibustered. In the next 3 years, they went out and bought another $1 trillion worth of mortgage-backed paper, enabling some of the worst lenders in the business. And then Barack Obama and everybody else voted for that same bill in September of 2008 to finally subject them to the same kind of regulation that we'd spent 8 years trying to get. So don't tell me we didn't try and do anything about Fannie and Freddie. Please, get your facts straight.
Karl, that's a lie. And I'll tell you why it's a lie, because if you wanted to do something about it, that baby Bush would have vetoed all this stuff. But he didn't, did he?
You know what? I love how you think that everything just goes down to doing a veto. There was no bill to veto. We wanted a bill passed. We had to proactively regulate Fannie and Freddie. Maybe while you were out there in New Zealand, you weren't paying attention to it. But let me tell you, I was in the battle day by day. I went up to Capitol Hill. Let me tell you a story about how insidious this was. I went up to Capitol Hill to one of these congressional fly-ins by a congressman from New York, and a banker got up and said, you know what, Fannie and Freddie borrow at 50 basis points less than I can borrow from the markets because the implicit power, the implicit promise the taxpayer is going to bail them out. What are you doing about it? And I said, here's what we're trying to do about it. Here's what we want to do. This is like in 2002. I get back to my office at the White House. I got 3 phone calls from Republican lobbyists on the payroll of Fannie and Freddie, the GSEs, saying, oh, we understand you got a problem. We'd like to come in and talk to you about it. That's everybody in Washington was bought up by those people. I fought them for 5 years. The president fought them for 5 years. We finally got the bill in place, but it was the accelerant that turned a minor downturn in the business cycle into a roaring international conflagration, and it was Democrats who blocked our ability to keep it and rein it in 2005.
That's right. Blame it on the Democrats.
Yeah, look, I think there's plenty of blame to go around here. I don't think the Democrats had anything to do with AIG, Citicorp, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Wachovia. I mean, look, I find all this very interesting, and of course, I'm having the best fun I've ever had with Karl Rove on the stage, thanks to Doug over here. But the truth is, look, we can poke each other all day long. We got some problems and we got to work them out. I'm not opposed to the bailouts that the Bush people started and that we have continued, because I think if you let the whole system go down, then you've got a huge problem. But we cannot continue with deficits of the kind we've had, which both parties are responsible. I'll give Doug that. And we got to find a way out of this. So, look, I'm all for having fun and all for waving our arms and hooting and hollering, but I also think that, leaving Doug aside because the Libertarians haven't quite gotten to the White House yet, although maybe someday they will. We have to work this out.
At least one was there.
Who was that?
Thomas Jefferson.
Well, since he was my party, I'll own that. We'll take that.
Yeah, I doubt you'd own his economic philosophy, though.
If it wasn't for Thomas Jefferson, Louisiana would be part of another country right now.
Okay.
And that was probably in violation of the Constitution.
That probably was. It probably was.
And it would have been
We could all be speaking Spanish or French.
That's right.
Now for my next question, I think I'll start with Howard Dean again. I have before me a list. It sounds like McCarthy here. I have before me a list of 21 czars, most of them appointed in the last 9 months. We have czars over energy. We have a TARP czar. That has a certain ring to it. We have czars over certain theaters of war. I know that's a press term, not an official government term. But isn't it offensive to you people that something that used to be a Russian despotic ruler has become the title for 21 super bureaucracies that have no responsibility? They are not approved by the Senate. There's no vetting of them, and they just come into power.
Since this is likely, based on how we've started this off, this is likely to get the only word I get in on this subject. Let me quickly.
You maintained a good strategic silence.
That's
so
right.
far.
No, I don't have any choice. It's hard to get a word in edgewise with these guys. Look, here's the deal with the so-called czars. First of all, the press invented the term. Second of all, every president does this. And the czars don't have a big bureaucracy, blah, 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 in the White House. What they've done, and I don't necessarily agree with this, this would not be the model of government that I would use if I were in the president's shoes. What they have chosen to do, and the President Bush did this also, but maybe not quite as many, is you have key people in the White House basically running the government, and they supersede cabinet authority. Now, I don't expect many people in this group to agree with what I'm about to say, but it's an illustration of what's going on. Ken Salazar has come out, as the Secretary of Interior, has come out with a lot of environmental policy. That policy is not being driven by Ken Salazar. It's being driven by Carol Browner in the White House. The same is true of health care. The same is true of a lot of the other things you talked about. It is a way that presidents control their own government. I personally, when I was governor, did not find that to be a terribly good mechanism to use it. And I'm not worried about the constitutionality of it, but I think what you do is you hire really smart, good people in the cabinet and let them run their own agencies and then pay attention to what they're doing. And we actually had real cabinet meetings where people came in and were forced to talk to the other people, because it turns out what happens in labor policy also has a big effect on education, and that has a big effect on economy, and that has an effect on investment, and it's all related. So even though I don't think it's unconstitutional, I think a lot of presidents have used this model, and I don't have a terrible problem with it. I wouldn't use it, but not because I'm worried about it constitutionally, but because I think we are better off if you don't concentrate all the power of the federal government in a relatively small number of people in the White House. If you disseminate that power, you're going to get some people making some mistakes, but you're also going to get more buy-in and, frankly, hard work on the part of those individuals who running the cabinet agencies.